what is the one exercise you'll never stop doing? Yeah.
I would say, hmm, if I had to pick one that covers a whole lot of stuff, it would be some variation of the deadlift. Now, before everybody gets scared and thinks about, okay, I'm thinking of heavy barbells and chalk and spit and blood and cringing and wrenching on your back. That's not necessarily what I mean. It's just basically your ability to hinge your hips and lift up something that's from below your waist. And so there's a lot of variations of that. And so some variation of that is going to cover a lot of ground from your mobility to function to strength. Even I can carry that over into your athleticism. So there's a lot of carryover in that. So that would be kind of one that would be definitely in the top five, if not pretty much a staple there.
Okay. What would be a variation on the deadlift? Because I used to deadlift a lot when I was lifting super heavy, maybe 15 years ago, and I found the mechanisms for myself a little bit awkward. So what would like the hex bar or something, or maybe the T bar lifts? What would be a good variation on the deadlift?
So yeah, the trapper hex bar is a great variation that kind of makes it a whole lot easier for the people because it puts your hands at your sides, and that completely changes the mechanics and the demands of it. Where most people
Right.
don't have the structures to get into a good position for a barbell deadlift, and even if they can, we have to modify that. So there's two primary variations. There's one where you put your hands outside of your shins. That would be called an Olympic deadlift because that's kind of the setup for one of the Olympic lifts, like you'd see in the Olympics of the clean and jerk and that kind of thing.
Right.
And then there's the sumo deadlift where you go a little wider stance and your hands inside your legs. So for me, as an
Okay.
example, someone who has short, stubby arms, it's really difficult for me to get into a good Olympic deadlift stance. So I don't do a heck of a lot of those, but I will do a sumo deadlift. Now the trap bar makes it even
Hmm.
easier because regardless of your structure, I can get you into a really good position in a trap bar. But there's also variations we can do where we can use a kettlebell. I love a lot of single leg deadlift variations because that has a lot of carryover to a bunch of different things. Plus, now you're incorporating balance and stability into there. So that's also a real good avenue we can go down that checks a lot of boxes because, again, I look at things more in terms of patterns than I do parts. As instead of saying, okay, I want an exercise that works this muscle, it doesn't really work that way. You got 400 muscles, a lot of with matching sets on both sides. If you worked something for every muscle, you'd be there all day. Whereas if I can work a pattern and what gets covered in a deadlift, and this is why it's probably one of my top ones, is pretty much everything, right? You're going to work your
Hmm.
grip. You're going to work your shoulder stability. You're going to work your core stability. You're going to work your core strength, depending on your loading. You're going to work your hip stability and or possibly mobility. So there's a lot of ground covered there.
Okay. And how's the T bar in comparison to the deadlift? Because now you've already just convinced me that I need to put the hex bar back in or the trap bar back into my workout. But how's the T bar for that?
T-bar as a deadlift would probably work a little bit better for what they call a Romanian deadlift, which is more where you're not getting as much knee bend and it's more just a pure hinge at the hips. That could work. And realize that you don't necessarily need to do everything in isolation, even in terms of patterns. So if I go into a T-bar and I do a bent over row, well, now I'm getting a hinge. I'm basically doing a static deadlift, holding a deadlift position while I'm getting a pulling motion. So I can kind of get a two for one there. So
Okay.
one of the biggest challenges I have with people, and it's regardless of whether you're a professional athlete um, or just a weekend warrior, is that time is your biggest challenge. Even when I work with
Hmm.
teams, time is our biggest challenge. So I don't have time to isolate every single pattern, every single part, and every single aspect of training that I'm looking to get to. So I have to try to combine things to get a lot of bang for the buck. So in the case of a T-bar, if I'm doing a bent over row, well, now I'm kind of covering two things with one shot.